All right, welcome everyone to the last webinar, Wildlife for You webinar for the year. Today we're doing a brand new webinar. I'm kind of excited about it because I think it came out pretty darn good. But tonight's webinar is Fantastic Felines. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about all the different wild cats or felines found in North America. My name is Daryl Radijek. As most of you know, I'm a wildlife biologist. I also love specializing in large carnivores. Bears are one of my passion. Also love cougars. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking to you for about 45 minutes to an hour, trying to teach you about some of the most important things about the wild felines or cats that we have here in North America. And what I want you to do is sit back, relax, absorb everything as much as you can. And if you have questions when we get to that point where we can take a few minutes and answer your questions or provide comments and feedback, we're going to do just that. So with that, I'm going to get started on today's presentation. And usually what I do at the very beginning of all these, especially for the new folks, but since we record these webinars, I want anyone that views them to understand where they're getting their information from. And so we always talk about the experiences of the Wildlife for You instructors. And so most people know this already, but again, my name is Daryl Radijek, and as you know, I'm a lifelong lover of wildlife. I have a passion for carnivores, like I said, bears, cougars. Those big scary animals are some of the things that I absolutely love dealing with and working with. But just so you know, I do have a degree in wildlife management. I got my degree in 1992, so that kind of dates me as how old I am. But that degree was from the State University of New York, College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Longest college name in all of the world. That's a true story. But if you've never heard of it before, it's on the Syracuse University campus. Fantastic college for wildlife and forestry. So anyway, I did get my degree in wildlife management from there. And from there, one of the first positions I took after receiving my degree, 1997, it's tough to get a job right away. That's why there's a little gap. But 1997, I was offered a position at a place called the Appalachian Bear Center. It's now known as ABR, Appalachian Bear Rescue. But I was more or less their first manager, the first curator of that facility. And way back when, there wasn't much of a facility there. It was a single wide trailer and some bear pens. But for about 5 years, I was raising and releasing orphan bear cubs that were brought to me by the National Park Service, as well as the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Fantastic job. That's where my passion for bears grew. But soon afterward, what I wanted to do is, or what I was instructed to do, is get a real job. So I started working for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency. Now, I started out as just an entry-level biologist, but because of my experiences at that Appalachian Bear Center, I was soon promoted, and I became the big game coordinator for the state of Tennessee. And I did that for about 7 years. So I was over white-tailed deer, I was over elk, but I was also over the whole black bear program for the state of Tennessee. And so instead of me dealing with individual animals like I did at the Bear Center, I was now managing populations of animals all throughout Tennessee, as well as in the Southeast. For some reason or another, the director of the agency saw something in me, and I was soon promoted to the Chief of Wildlife and Forestry for the state of Tennessee. Did that for another 5 years. So instead of me being over just the deer, bear, and elk in the state, I was over all wildlife in the state of Tennessee. Fantastic job. Absolutely loved it. But when you're at that level position, you spend most of your days dressed in a business suit and meeting with commissioners and politicians, and that's not what I love to do. I love working with animals. So I made a leap of faith and moved out west. I had a boyhood dream of living and working out west, and now I landed in New Mexico. Needless to say, I have 20 years experience working with wildlife. So hopefully you understand that what I'm teaching you today is some pretty good stuff, and it's all based on science. We try to leave opinion out of here. We want everything to be based on science. Now, having said that, I do have a favor of you guys. Now, this is brand new. Never did this before, but if you're sitting at your computer, iPad, or wherever you may be, what I'm going to do a little test. I'm going to I want to get a feeling for how much you like these Wildlife for You webinars. And so I created this graphic that's going to pop up here, and I want you to just write down the sentence that appears on this graphic about what you think of these webinars. So if you have a pen and paper, or if you could just remember it, that's fine. No big deal if you don't have anything, but I'm going to put up this graphic and you just tell me what it says. So is everybody ready? All right, here goes. Did everyone see that? If you haven't seen it, no, I don't want anyone to type anything yet, but I'm going to do it one more time. Remember, nobody type anything. Okay, that's what it said, guys. And so that's all I wanted you to do. Just write down that sentence or remember that sentence. And you'll see why here in a second, I promise. And just don't mind me, I keep looking up at the wrong camera. Let me move that so I don't get confused anymore. Okay, so let's get started. What we're going to do today is we are going to spend the next 45 minutes, maybe an hour, talking about cats. Well, the cats in North America are the felines, and oftentimes I've done a number of webinars about the dogs or the canids, and those tend to get confusing because of all this hybridization. We don't have to worry about that too much. People know the distinct species of cats here in North America. But I'm going to start with a question. This is where you can type. How many species of wild cats live in North America? Now, I will tell you what I'm referring to in North America here is Canada and the US. So what would you guess? How many different species of wild cats? 2, 2, 3. Any last guesses? 5. All right, fantastic guesses. And if I have to award a present, I guess it goes to Trish, because believe it or not, there's 6 wild cats that can be found in North America, in the U.S. Now, a couple of them, there's very, very few sightings of them, but there are actually 6 different species of wild cats. We're not talking house cats or domestic cats or anything like that. These are truly wild species of cats. Now, I will tell you there's 4 of what we call the smaller cat species in North America, and there's 2 of the big cat species. And so we're going to start talking about which ones they are. So let's start with those small cats. There's actually 4 species of small cats in North America. 2 of them everyone's going to know. The other 2 you may not know, but by the end of this presentation you will, and that's why we do these presentations. But let's start with this guy. Everyone knows what that is, I'm sure. Whoever types it first is the winner. That's pretty easy. It is a bobcat. Everyone knows what bobcats are. The scientific name for a bobcat is Lynx rufus. Very, very common cat. And if you look at the species distribution, you can see it's pretty much found all over the lower half of North America. So the United States is pretty much covered up. Now there is a gap in the lower part of the Great Lakes region. They were extirpated from there. They really haven't come back. But for the most part, it's pretty much found all throughout the lower 48 states. And obviously it goes into southern Canada as well. So very widely distributed cat. Now, the next one is a very, very similar cousin. I'm sure people know what that is. Looks very similar to a bobcat, and it's very much related to a bobcat, so much so that it's in the same genus. The bobcat was Lynx rufus. This is Lynx canadensis. So instead of being a bobcat, this one here that you see before you is a Canada lynx. Oftentimes we just call them lynx. There's a couple of different species of lynx, but for the most part here in North America, they're Canada lynx. But if you look at the distribution of this cat, you see it is a northern species. So when you think of these two, the bobcat and the lynx, exact same species. One is kind of the northern cat, which is the lynx. One is the southern cat, which is the bobcat. They look very, very similar. You can see one really big difference on this guy, but we're not going to talk about it just yet. We'll get into that in just a little bit. Now, this is where you're probably going to learn something because many people have not heard of this. Now, does anyone know what that cat is? I'll give you a second to type it. Chris gets the medal. Good guess, Shirley. It's not a serval. An ocelot is actually the correct name for that. Leopardus pardalis. Now, if you look at this range map, the reason almost everyone didn't guess these in the beginning, you're not going to find it unless you're on that southern border of Texas. The range usually expands well into Central America, South America, but a couple of observations and documented known occurrences of the ocelot has occurred in Texas. So I got to include it. We're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it because the chance of anyone ever running into one of these while you're in the U.S. is pretty small. Just as it is with this next cat. Does anyone know what this is? Again, this is going to be one of those Texas cats because it's primarily in South America, Central America, but believe it or not, a couple of documented occurrences have been recorded in Texas. Nope, not a jaguar, but you're so very close. You got to add about 4 letters to the end of that word. Can anyone guess it? Very good. Beth Boatwright gets the next medal for today. It's called a jaguarundi, and even though it has that jaguar name in it, it looks very similar to a mountain lion, but they're much, much smaller. And again, if you look at the distribution of this, again, it comes up through South America, Central America, and just barely nicks the lower portion of Texas. And so since there has been documented occurrences within Texas, I threw these in here. Now these last two, the ocelot and the jaguarundi, almost nobody is ever going to witness these if you spend your whole life in the United States. They're extremely rare occurrences, but just so you know, those are 2 other wildcats that have been documented here. But we're not going to spend a ton of time talking about it. We will spend a little bit, but not too much. Okay, so those are the 4 small cats that can occur in North America. What about the big cats? Obviously, it's going to be one of my favorite ones. Everyone knows what this is. This is what we call the cougar, which is Puma concolor. Now, I will tell you that a lot of people get surprised when they see the range map because a lot of people think cougars live all over North America, but they don't. Cougars, when you look at their distribution, this red area here is the known distribution where we have very solid populations. They've been there forever. They've never been extirpated. But this hash mark that I just show you with the red, the cougars also live in these areas. Their populations have recently come back there, and many of them are doing quite well. But their range is expanding eastward tremendously. It's an awesome, awesome thing because cougars used to be found, prior to European settlement, cougars were found pretty much the entire North American continent, all the way in the entire South American continent. They were the most widespread western mammal there was. They ranged all the way from the northern parts of Canada all the way down to the southern tip of South America. But because of European settlement, we unfortunately extirpated them, which is a fancy word to locally kill them out. And so you don't find cougars on the east coast of the United States anymore. But they are moving eastward more and more every single year, which is wonderful. We'll get more into that in a little bit too. So there's only one more cat that's left. We did 4 small cats, 1 big cat. There's 1 other big cat. And a couple of you mentioned it already. And it's this guy. This is what we call the jaguar. And some will be surprised to hear that they're in the United States. You're going to be very surprised because there's only 1, possibly 2 in the United States. But you could see where their range restricted to mountainous areas. but it does touch that border of Arizona and New Mexico. And we do have documented occurrences of a jaguar in that area. And I'll talk more about him in a little bit. But those are the 6 species of cats we have here in North America. But since we're ending on that jaguar and the mountain lion and the jaguar, those are the big cats. The one thing I want to talk about, just to make sure everybody's clear, because oftentimes whenever I'm talking to the public, I find there's often a lot of confusion about what to call these animals, and sometimes they call them the wrong name. And so what's in a name? Well, let's look at one of my favorite animals, and this is an animal obviously that is well throughout the western half of North America. And if you look at that scientific name, Puma concolor, that is that name for a cougar. Now this cougar can also go by a couple of other different names. For example, some people call it a puma, some people call it a mountain lion. I hear this I read this all the time. I really haven't heard too many people call it a catamount, but that's another name for it. And some call it a painter. If you haven't guessed what a painter is, it's kind of like the southern drawl type of pronunciation for another word, which is panther. And so should we call a mountain lion a panther? Now, where this word panther comes from, you have to understand there is a genus of cats, they're big cats, that fall under the genus Panthera. Now, Panthera consists, there's 4 primary species or genuses. Well, it's one genus, but there's 4 primary cats that fall under Panthera. You have the African lion, which is Panthera leo. We also have the tiger, and there's different subspecies of tigers, but the tiger is Panthera tigris. The leopard is Panthera pardus, and that's usually in Southeast Asia or in Africa. And then last but not least is the one I just showed you, which was jaguar, which is Panthera onca. And so you see all 4 of those large cats come from the genus Panthera. These are what should be called panthers because of that genus name. So what about the dreaded or the well-known black panther? People all over, believe it or not, people all over North America report black panthers all the time. Are there black panthers in North America? And here's the answer to that question. You have to understand that a black panther is simply a melanistic version or a black version of either the leopard, which is that Panthera pardus, which is found in Southeast Asia. I don't know why this slide's screwing up. Hopefully none others will. So a black panther is either a leopard or it's a jaguar, that Panthera onca, which is primarily in South America and Central America. And so whenever you hear or see a black panther, and obviously zoos and different circuses used to have black panthers, those are not native to North America. So you are not going to find a black panther wandering around in the wild in North America because it's either a jaguar or a leopard, which generally does not wander around in North America. Now, I will tell you the jaguars that are found along that border, none have been documented to be black. So, well, what then about a mountain lion? Why don't we have black mountain lions? Believe it or not, there has never been a black cougar in documented history. There's been some darker browns, but we've never had a black cougar ever documented in history. And so it is believed that they don't carry the gene that allows them to be melanistic or black. So wanted to get that straightened up because I hear about black panthers way more than I should. Okay, hopefully the slide doesn't mess up anymore. So what I want to do here, does anyone have any questions about the species before I get into the cat facts? Anyone have any questions about the different species we have? That's good. It means I'm doing a good job. Oh, Lori, you had to start typing something, didn't you? It's okay. That's why we're here. We want you to ask questions if you have them. Yes, I will. I will talk about that here in a little while. I have a slide for that, but very, very good question. But what I want to do now, we're going to talk about cat facts. We're going to talk about the different cats that I just went through. We'll go through them one by one so you can learn at least a little bit about each one of those. So let's start with that most widespread cat of all, which is the bobcat, Lynx rufus. This is one of those smaller cats that we have in North America. And so let's start with the description. What do bobcats look like? So if you're out there and you see this cat run in front of you, what are we looking for to distinguish and determine whether or not it's a bobcat? First of all, they're relatively small cats. Think of them as like a supersized house cat. They're not, many of them are not much bigger than house cats, but they could get a lot bigger. So weight-wise, you're looking at 10 to 40 pounds. 40 pounds is a huge bobcat. For the most part, they average about 20 pounds. And you have to understand, throughout all these cat species, usually the males will be not much, but significantly larger than the females. And so weight-wise, 10 to 40 pounds. On average, you're looking 20, 25 pounds for a bobcat. So you can see that they are bigger than house cats, but they're not tremendously bigger than house cats. I know some pretty fat house cats too. So now, the one thing, if you look at the screen, I circled them in yellow. One of the distinguishing characteristics, as soon as you see this, right away it should start tipping your hand that you're looking at a bobcat as opposed to like a feral house cat, are those ear tufts. Those little black, extra long hairs that they have at the end of their ears. Very indicative of a bobcat. The other thing about their ears that not many people know, and this is one of the things I look at whenever I get sent pictures to help determine what kind of cat it is. If you get a view from the back, bobcats typically have this black and white coloration on the backs of their ears. Very distinguishable. Some are really distinct. Some may not be as distinct as this picture, but this black and white coloration on their ears is usually typical of a bobcat. And of course, the reason they are named bobcats is because of their bobbed tails. So if you look at the picture here, this cat has a really short, stubby tail. The picture on the left that's kind of in my little placeholder there, you see the tail is a little bit longer. It's probably about 3 inches long. But then you could have some bobcats that really have long, not really long tails, but you could have a 6 to 8 inch tail on a bobcat. But for the most part, their tails are much, much shorter than a typical cat that you would find. Hence the name bobcat. It's in reference to their bobbed tails. So what do bobcats feed upon? Obviously, they're cats. Anyone that has a house cat knows that cats are always hunting, looking for food. They're killing birds, small mammals, mice all the time. Bobcats are no different. When you look at their diet, they're primarily preying on small mammals. In fact, typically, most of their diet, almost all of their diet, consists of animals that weigh well under 10 pounds. So whether or not it's chipmunks or squirrels or woodchucks or rabbits, these are all the primary food items for a bobcat. That's what this cat is typically feeding on. Now, I will tell you, cats are much better designed to feast upon or prey upon birds than the dogs are, or the canines are. Obviously, cats are built to stalk and pounce on prey really quickly. They can jump high. And so cats, for the most part, are much more effective at capturing birds than, say, the coyotes and foxes are designed. And so bobcats will also prey on birds. Now, the reason I put these two species, in case you don't know what those are, obviously everyone knows a turkey, but the other one is a bobwhite quail. The reason I use these two species is these are ground nesting birds. They spend most of their time on the ground. So it's usually these species that are more susceptible than, say, a migratory bird, which can just fly away, doesn't spend a lot of time on the ground. These ground nesting birds are typically more at risk from being preyed upon by bobcats. And then last but not least, what about larger mammals? Do bobcats eat deer? And I put that picture up there of that nice looking buck. Can a bobcat kill a deer like that? It probably could. If conditions were right, it probably could. I will tell you without a doubt, it usually doesn't. Bobcats typically don't prey on adult deer. Now, someone will say, well, I saw this or I saw that or someone showed me this. Yes, it can happen, but it's extremely, extremely rare. However, what a bobcat will do is scale it down. They might feast on a younger deer. This is a yearling or a fawn, or kind of like a much older fawn here. A bobcat would have a much easier time taking that animal down than the one on the right. And so if it's going to prey on those two, obviously it's going to go for the smaller prey item. Which leads us to this cute and wonderful picture of a newborn fawn, or this fawn's only less than a few months old. This is typically, whenever you hear of bobcats preying on deer, this is typically what they're preying on because they're much easier prey for them to take down. They're usually only about 10 to 15 pounds. And so that this prey item is definitely on course for what a bobcat can take down. And so those things, the small mammals, the birds, some of those smaller, larger mammals, that's primarily the diet of a bobcat. So I'll end with a cool little fact about bobcats. Did you know that although it's extremely rare, bobcats can actually exhibit that melanistic quality or be black? Now, I will tell you, a lot of people will say, "Oh, that must be what I saw because I saw a black cat wherever." These are extremely, extremely, extremely rare. There's documented occurrences in Florida, a couple of them in Canada, and if I'm not mistaken, is either Virginia or West Virginia. But they're extremely rare. This does not happen all too often. However, bobcats can exhibit this melanistic behavior. In fact, when you think about it, when you think about an albino, black versions or melanistic versions are usually even rarer than albinos. That's how rare they are. So, thought that was kind of cool. Anyway, let's move on to the close cousin of the bobcat, the lynx. And I think what you already saw is the lynx looks almost exactly like a bobcat. And so they're extremely closely related. They're both in that genus Lynx. This is kind of like the northern version of the bobcat. And you'll see whenever you move north, usually the bodies get bigger. That's called the Bergman's rule. But the bodies get bigger so they can survive the cold easier. Now, the weight difference is not much. They can get a little bit bigger than bobcats, but not much. Still a medium-sized cat, weighing anywhere from 10 pounds to 50 pounds. The males are going to be a little bit larger than the females, but a 50-pound lynx is a huge lynx. But you can see the weight distribution there, and it's still a relatively it's not a small cat, but it's definitely not a huge cat. A couple of things really separate the lynx from the bobcat. See those ear tufts? Generally, not in every single situation, but generally those ear tufts are much more pronounced or longer. They're usually a lot longer. You can see them easier on a lynx than you can a bobcat. So that's one. Now keep in mind their tails. They still have bobtails just like the bobcat. But this is the picture I love. The thing that really separates the lynx from the bobcat are the feet. Look at the size of those feet. They literally have snowshoes strapped to the bottom of their feet, especially their back feet. Obviously, with these cats being a more northern species, they are built to run on top of the snow. And so those huge paws are a tremendous benefit. The reason they have those huge paws, if you look at their primary diet, unlike a bobcat, which eats all those little critters that they can find, the primary diet for a lynx is a snowshoe hare. Look at the feet on that snowshoe hare. Exact same design feature. They are built to run on top of the snow. And so you have this prey item that has these snowshoe feet, and you have the cat that has snowshoe feet. They're literally designed to just run on top of that snow. And so this is a scene that repeats all over Canada, all over those northern climates. Wherever we have lynx, those lynx are usually going after snowshoe hares. That's their primary diet. Now, having said that, they will absolutely eat other critters. They'll eat anything that they could find, from mice to voles to squirrels, anything they could get their paws upon. But for the most part, their primary diet is the snowshoe hare. So, did you know? Here's my interesting fact about lynx, and this is pretty cool. Colorado. Now, even though most of the lynx are found in Canada, they are a high elevation, that alpine tundra, that cold, snowy area. They can be found, so they do dip down into the Rockies. Lynx, for a long time, since 1970, were extirpated from the state of Colorado, and the Colorado Division of Wildlife, actually it's, I think, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they wanted to restore lynx, and they undertook what is one of the largest carnivore reintroduction programs. Understand that it's usually a very controversial program when you release things like wolves. It tends to get extremely controversial. But Colorado undertook this lynx reintroduction beginning in the late 1990s, extended until 2006, and they released about 218 Canada lynx down in that southern part of Colorado. Cool thing about that is some of those animals actually dropped down in New Mexico, not far from where I'm at. In fact, at least one of them was documented on the forest that I work. But it's pretty neat that you have these Canada lynx, these really northern species that survive just fine in the Rocky Mountains, being restored to their former range in those mountain chains. And I got to give Colorado Parks and Wildlife all the credit for being such a forward thinker and making sure you restore those carnivore populations as well. All right. I promised we'd talk a little bit about it, so I'm not going to spend too much time, but those two obscure small cat species that we have, unless you're living down in Texas, there might be some that occasionally pop up in New Mexico, but unless you're in Texas, you'll probably never ever get to see, you probably won't even read about the ocelot and the jaguarundi. But I will tell you a little bit about them just because I'm here to educate. So, description, here's the one thing that is really cool. First off, they're relatively small animals. These are usually much smaller than the bobcats and the lynx. So you're looking at a small cat, anywhere from 10 to 35 pounds for the ocelot. Believe it or not, the jaguarundi is even smaller than that, usually 8 to 20 pounds. So think of that more like just a really wild house cat. The description, though, I think was wonderful. I was reading about it. The ocelot, the one gentleman described the ocelot, it's kind of like a tiger-like coat, but he described it as just a series of dots, spots, bars, stripes, and smudges. And so I guess looking at a number of pictures, if you ever get to search for them, they have just amazing patterning, from dots and spots to stripes, and it's just all over the place. And they're absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous cats. But I guess the closest comparison we could come up is it has this tiger-like coat. The jaguarundi, on the other hand, pretty similar to a cougar. It has that uniform color. It could be brown, it could be gray, it could be a reddish color, but it's a fairly uniform looking coat. Very, very similar to the cougars of North America. And last but not least, tail-wise, the ocelot has a medium. It's not a bobtail. It's not a super long tail. It's about a medium tail for a cat. Whereas the jaguarundi, they have long tails, again, very much like a cougar. And so that's pretty much the description. Like I said, unless you're living on that southern border of Texas, the odds of you ever encountering one of these in the wild are slim to none. But if you see it in the zoo, if you ever go to the zoo, at least you'll be familiar with what those cats look like. So how about diet? Pretty simple. You have to think where they're living. Now, they do touch Texas, but Central America, so this is a much more southern type of climate that they're living in. And so they're dealing with a lot of small mammals. Obviously, they're going to be eating mice and gophers, occasional possum if they run across that. But from a bird standpoint, they're not generally dealing with turkeys, taking down turkeys and things like that. The southern birds, you got roadrunners, you got these, they're called gamble quail. But these ground nesting birds or ground dwelling birds will make up a good part of these cats' diet. But you also have to think, again, you're way down south, you're going to start getting a lot of reptiles. And so these cats will definitely feast on more and more of the reptiles than some of their more northern cousins. And so pretty simple to see what they're eating, obviously based on where they live. Just think of a wild cat, beautiful wild cats, and that's what they're going to be eating. So what's cool about these two species, although we haven't heard of them much, not many people are really familiar with the ocelot and the jaguarundi, the cool thing with them is, although they're rarely ever seen, their populations worldwide are doing really well. I ended up throwing up the range. Their two ranges overlap really, really closely, but you can see they're pretty much widespread throughout South America, shoots all the way up through that Central America peninsula, and just tips the southernmost part of the United States. So that's all we're going to talk about them, unless you have questions on them. I'm going to move on to the big cats. Are y'all ready? Does anyone have any questions on the small cats in North America yet? I see Mara is typing, and Lori. I got it. I swear, whenever I start talking, my nose gets clogged. I feel fine. I think it's just my body reacting to me. It's telling me to shut up. Don't talk so much. Mara, good question. Have I seen an ocelot or jaguarundi in the wild? No, I have not. I have not spent much time in Texas. A friend of mine who I converse with all the time, he's really much bigger on cats than I am, and he was the one that was, he would tell me whenever there's a new report of a jaguarundi in Texas, because he was thinking that some of these cougar sightings that people are reporting are potentially just jaguarundis, that they're mistaken identity. You could easily see why those could be mistaken for cougars. They're much, much smaller than cougars, though. Bet asked a question, do bobcats attack humans? There's, okay, I'm going to say no. But understand that there's always these oddball cases. For the most part, a bobcat being so small, you're looking at a cat that's typically weighing about 20 pounds, they know when they're outmatched. And so they are not going to take on a human unless a couple of things come into play. The cat is sick, there's something wrong with it, or it's starving, that it's going to do more bolder moves. Or say there's a really small child. They're always going after smaller predators, just like the cougars. You have to be more careful with the smaller human beings, the littler children, because they're closer to the prey size that they're willing to take on. So bobcats don't attack humans. I will tell you, I have been stalked by bobcats. But having said that, it's not what you're thinking. What will happen, I'm in the woods a lot. I'm always sitting still, whether or not it's with a camera or if I was out hunting some other animal. If you're sitting still, not moving for a long time, especially if you're wearing camouflage, many times these wild cats, lots of wild animals, will walk close to you because they don't know you're there. A couple of times I'd be sitting, for example, at the base of a tree, and I'll just be moving my head looking around. Understand that when an animal like a bobcat sees that from a distance, they don't see the human form. They just see this small thing move, which would be my head, moving back and forth. So immediately they go into stalk mode. That could be a potential meal for them. And they don't know exactly what it is, but they want to get closer to find out, is this something I could eat? And so I know of at least 2 times I've been sitting there, and out of the corner of my eye I see something moving, and you see, it was twice with a bobcat and once with a coyote. They were coming, and they were in stalk mode, getting closer to me. And then as soon as I saw them, I smiled, and I just talked to them, or I'd wave my arms, and it freaks them out because then they're like, oh my gosh, it's a human, and they take off running. So can they attack a human? Yeah, obviously anything can attack a human. Do they attack humans? Almost never. So hopefully you understood that. Let me go back and make sure I got all the questions. Okay, Lori Gunter asked, is there some advantage to the ear tufts? Um, I haven't found any scientific papers. I've read a couple of things where it says it helps them detect sounds. I don't know if it's the vibration. I don't know to what magnitude it improves their hearing, but supposedly it has some benefit with improving their hearing. I don't believe because they're simply magnified hairs, it just might be some vibrations that allow them to just say, hey, something's going on, and then they can focus their attention in that direction. I heard it's to help them out, but I really haven't read any papers that tell me exactly how it helps them out. So, wish I had a stronger answer for you. Okay, Chanda, is there no benefit for balance or climbing from a long tail? There's a huge benefit. Generally, when it comes to balance with a long tail, it's not so much for climbing. It's not like a monkey's tail that's prehensile that they could like grab onto things with. The benefit of a long tail with a feline is generally in pursuit. When they're running after the prey, and that prey is going to be dodging back and forth, trying to get away, the tail acts as a counterbalance. So if the cat has to turn quickly, it doesn't. There's not too much centrifugal force that it goes tumbling. So the tail acts as a counterbalance in that fast pursuit of trying to catch their prey item. And so it definitely has a tremendous use, that long tail. And you see this a lot in cheetahs. You've probably seen documentaries there. Undoubtedly, it also helped cougar because remember they're really short distance, fast action, but that tail definitely helps them out in their pursuit of prey. Shirley, do you know? You say the spots on the backs of the ears is self-defense. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. I know exactly what you're talking about because there's many insects, like for example butterflies, that have wing markings that look like eyes that is supposed to deter a predator, like an owl or a bird. If they suddenly see these big eyes flash in front of them, it would scare them. I doubt those ear markings are used in the same way on the bobcat because they are the predator. Um, and yeah, I just think it's a coloration difference. I've never heard that proposed as being a defense mechanism of mimicry there. So yeah, it's definitely used in some species, but I doubt it's used for that bobcat. That's Chanda asked a question: what advantage would not having a tail for bobcats and lynxes? That is a good question. I don't know why they have evolved with bobbed tails. They just have. You would think just knowing, especially with the lynx, that they're pursuing snowshoe hare, that a longer tail would benefit them. But somewhere along the line, Mother Nature decided that having a long tail for a lynx and a bobcat just wasn't necessary, and so they simply evolved without that. Okay, I'm going to get moving on and continue the presentation. Fantastic question so far. So now what I want to do is just talk a little bit about the two large cat species that we have. Hopefully I can get this moving forward. Okay. So the jaguar, that's what a jaguar looks like. Now that's what kind of jaguar my wife wants us to have. Okay, jaguar description. Wait, this is where you could say, hey, man, these are large cats. You look at a jaguar and what it weighs, 120 to 250 pounds. Now, I will tell you, there's larger jaguars like than that on record. Some have tipped the scales at 300. I think one tipped the scales at almost 350. But typically in the wild, you get the big males in that 200 to 250 pound range. Females are usually less than that. But you can see these are much bigger cats. They're 10 times bigger than a lot of those, the bobcats, which may weigh 20 pounds. And so they're definitely much bigger cats. Another thing that's really cool, I love it, and I wish this zoomed in picture did better, but The patterning on a jaguar is so unique. It's so beautiful. They have this rosette patterning. It's kind of like this broken circle with a series of dots in the middle. The cool thing with the jaguar is those can be used almost as a fingerprint, because all the different jaguar coats or pelts are all different, and you just look at that rosette patterning to identify individual jaguars by that rosette patterning. And last but not least, believe it or not, I mentioned it earlier, jaguars can be melanistic. Now I will tell you, the melanistic jaguars that are in the wild are almost all in South America. I haven't found many records, or any if all, that have occurred in Central America close to the U.S. border. So when I say there's no black panthers or black jaguars in North America, I'm pretty much 101% confident in that as far as wild jaguars. But jaguars can be melanistic. The cool thing, if you look at that picture, it's not completely black. It's not like a black cat. You can see the rosette patterning underneath that coat. It has this almost dark smoke color to it, makes it appear black, but you can definitely still see the coloration within that fur of theirs. So what do they eat? This is where it gets really, really cool. Jaguar, big cat, hungry, it eats anything. It's been known to eat at least 87 different species. Now understand, most of these cats live in South America and Central America, but they've been known to eat like 87 different species of mammals. Pretty much they eat whatever they want to eat. I'll test someone. Does anyone know what that's a picture of? We don't have them here in North America, at least native. A capybara. Very good. They're giant. I was going to say they're giant rats, but they don't have a rat's tail. They're in the rodent family. They're the largest rodent in the world, and jaguars love them. And so they'll eat lots of those. That they obviously, as a bigger cat, you want to eat as big of an animal as you can because it feeds you much more. You only have to eat one capybara as opposed to, say, 50 different squirrels. And so it's much easier to kill those larger animals. Jaguars will also eat snakes. This is a jaguar eating a python. And so they're very adept at eating pretty much anything that moves. And the cool thing with them, jaguars are very comfortable in water. And so they will go after animals in the water. They're not going to take on a giant alligator or caiman. They'll take on average size ones. But they also go after sea turtles. I found out that that's one big thing on their diet. Some of those sea turtles can get over 500 pounds, and the jaguars will take them on. Cool thing that I learned, and I didn't know this until I was researching information on this webinar, is the bite force for a jaguar is so much stronger than almost any other feline. It's even stronger than African lion and a tiger. And what I found incredible, some of you may think this is they don't want to hear it, but typically when a large cat goes after a larger prey item, say it's feeding on a deer or an elk, most people know, and I've taught this before, the cougar goes for the throat. That's how they can get these larger animals down quickly. Because what the cougar is going to do, it's going to bite the esophagus or the larynx, so the animal can't breathe, and they snuff it out that way as quickly as they can. Sometimes the cougar will bite the back of the neck and try to bite the vertebra to paralyze the animal, but for the most part, that cougar is going for the neck. What I found was really interesting is the jaguar, having such a strong bite force, oftentimes goes right for the skull. If they can get their mouth around the animal's head, it's lights out for that animal. And so, pretty interesting. I never knew that. I thought that was a really interesting part of the jaguar diet. So they eat pretty much anything they want to. Now, here's a did you know. It's a happy and it's a sad, but did you know in North America, I don't know, has anyone ever heard of El Jefe? All right, at least one person has. El Jefe is the jaguar that is known in North America. This jaguar has been living in around the Tucson area. It's the Coronado National Forest. It's right on the border of Arizona, New Mexico, and Mexico. So it's right at the very tip of the United States. And it's a pretty popular cougar. There's literally, we've been keeping track of this cougar for years and years, or not cougar, I'm sorry, of this jaguar for years and years. And so it's been nicknamed El Jefe, and it's been living in that area for a while. Now, I will tell you, so we know there's at least one. Probably about 3 years ago, we kind of got excited because another jaguar showed up just outside a military base in Arizona, not far from where El Jefe was. And the reason they knew it was a different jaguar was because of the pattern. They looked at photographs and someone said, hey, that's not El Jefe, this has a different patterning on it. And sure enough, they verified they had at least another jaguar, so they're hoping a little romance might go on. But this is where it takes a sad turn, because less than a year ago, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service saw a jaguar pelt that was on the black market in Mexico. And sure enough, that jaguar that showed up in the United States about 2 years ago ended up being poached and sold on the black market. So not a real happy ending, but hopefully with enough perseverance and more people caring about these animals, we can get some of these animals more established. But that's something to know about the jaguar. We still have at least one, possibly two, that come up here, but hopefully these animals will stick around, not disappear under our watch. Okay, now the last animal I'm going to talk about is obviously another big cat, one of my favorites. It's the cougar, genus and species Puma concolor. Now, description, if you've ever attended my cougar country or colossal cats, we talk about cougars quite a bit, but I'll go over it briefly. Description, again, this is the big cat of North America. Weight, 80 pounds to 200 pounds. 200-pound mountain lion or cougar is a really big cat. Now, some of the males can get a little bit bigger than that. You've probably seen some pictures of some of these really huge cougars. But for the most part, they're in that 120, these large adults are 120 to probably about 200 pounds. So still a really, really big cat. Much, much bigger than a house cat or a domestic cat. The coloration, if you look at that scientific name, concolor, it literally means one color, uniform color. And this tawny is this light brown color. So that tawny coloration is an example of it. And then this long tail. We always talk about the long tail that a cougar has. That definitely aids in those quick bursts for balance and being able to be extremely maneuverable when it's chasing an animal. Typically, the tip of their tail is darker in color. Sometimes it's black, sometimes it's just a darker brown. But usually you see that dark tip tail, which is indicative of a cougar. What is so great about this picture here? Well, if you look in the direction of the mountain where that cat is looking, my house is just on the other side. Well, not just, it's probably 20 miles on the other side of that. But this picture was taken not too far from where I live. And so there's 3 cats in that picture. It's just so awesome living in an area that you know has all these big animals, from elk to bears to cougars, and they're all doing just wonderful. And you get along just fine. There's really no conflict here. So what's the diet of a cougar? Pretty much this. They love to eat these large, what we call ungulates. And I hate using these technical terms, but these are the hooved animals. So deer, sheep, things like that, bighorn sheep. For the most part, their diet consists of mule deer and elk. And so 90% of it will be these animals. They will supplement their diet with smaller animals. So if they could get on a woodchuck or a possum or anything that they find crawling around, obviously they're going to eat it. One of the things that gives cougars a bad rap, it doesn't happen all too often, but there's lots of slow tasting animals on the landscape. So every once in a while they get blamed. I don't know if they're all to blame, but they've been known to kill some livestock, whether or not it's sheep or some of these younger cattle. But who's to blame them when they're looking for a meal and we have these big, slow, not very well adapted to the wild type of livestock roaming the outdoors? So, with that, did you know cougars have been extirpated? That's that fancy word saying they're locally extinct from pretty much all of the East Coast for like many, many decades. However, there has been a population that has survived in the Everglades, and I think Lori brought this up before. If you look in the southern tip, there's been it dropped to well below 100 animals, and then I think it was about 10, 15 years ago they brought in some cougars from the Texas area to kind of bring in some genetic diversity. But those cougars there in the Everglades, it drives me nuts because I explained that term Panthera. Those cougars are called Florida Panthers. We'll live with it. That's what they were called. That's what they were nicknamed. As long as you understand that, for the most part, a panther is one of those other species. But whenever you hear people talking about Florida Panthers, they're talking about the species cougars. They're not talking about tigers or African lions that are wandering around. So those Florida Panthers, it's a misnomer. It never should have been called that, but it was, and that's okay. But they're just regular cougars that are living in that southern part of Florida. So this is where I love talking about it because I spent a good deal of my career in Tennessee talking about people would report cougars to me all the time as that big game coordinator. So we're going to talk a little bit about the cougar range because I think this is one of the most widely misunderstood animals in North America. Here's why. Cougars primarily are this western species, all throughout the Rockies into the Midwest. You can see those. They dominate the western states, but you can see in the Midwest, all those different dots there are obviously where they're having lots and lots of cougars. Those cougars are reproducing, and they're moving eastward. So much so, 2011, there was a cat. You see that red arrow? There was a cat that was killed, a cougar that was killed in Connecticut on the highway. And as everyone thought, oh my God, see, this proves that we have cougars in the Northeast. No, actually it didn't, because that cougar was documented as it made its way all the way through those Great Lake states and through the northern part of New York. There were pictures of it. There was DNA left behind. And eventually it was a western or a midwestern cat that went on this long walk. It was over 1,000 miles, I believe. Ended up getting killed on a highway in Connecticut. Another cougar did something similar. 2015, my home state, not really my home state, but where I used to work, showed up in the fall of 2015. We were predicting that a cougar is going to end up in Tennessee before too long, and we all predicted it'd come in from the western part of the state, and that's what it did. When it showed up in 2015, it was photographed in the northwesternmost part of the state, and then it moved eastward across the state. And as it moved eastward, it was getting photographed. There was DNA evidence. And so we documented this one cat as it moved across the state. Once again, people are saying, see, that proves cougars are in Tennessee. Since one cat arrived and was photographed, that proves that cougars were not in Tennessee, because when one shows up, it was getting photographed and leaving evidence behind. Now, the cool thing is both those cats genetically were traced back to the Black Hill population. Its ancestors came from that Black Hills area. So we know these are Midwestern cats that are moving eastward. Now, if you look at the dot, there's a dot right on the border of Alabama and Georgia. That was actually a cat. It was a wild cat, but that one was traced back when they did the DNA. It was, unfortunately, it was a cat that was poached. Someone saw it and they shot it because they thought they were in danger. Turned out to be a Florida panther or Florida cougar. And fortunately, those Florida cats are endangered. And so that person who shot that cat was fined, I believe it was $15,000. Of quite a bit of money for his actions. So hopefully we can deter people from taking action into their own hand, because there's nothing to worry about when these cats do show up in these states. So understand that folks that live in the East, there's always a chance of this nomadic, this wanderer that could come from a faraway population, whether or not it's one of those Midwestern cats or a cat that comes up from that Florida, that southern Florida population. So a cat can show up somewhere at some point. Generally, it gets photographed along the way when it does. So what about, and I can tell you firsthand, there's literally thousands of observations of cougars all over the East Coast. What's going on there? And so what are people seeing? I will tell you, as the big game coordinator, I was more or less the state of Tennessee's cougar detective for about actually over 10 years, because I kept doing it when I was chief. But you have to understand that biologists, a lot of people think there's a conspiracy theory that we're trying to cover up. We don't want anyone to know that there's cougars. That could not be further from the truth. We wanted to find cougars. We were looking. We wanted that hardcore evidence. The problem was we needed irrefutable evidence. If someone comes up to me and said, hey, I saw a cougar, I can't just say, oh, yep, we got him. You have to have that irrefutable evidence. And it's kind of funny. I laugh about it all the time, because people would show me their evidence, which unfortunately didn't pan out, and they thought I was just being salty. I was called salty a couple of times because I kept shooting down some of the evidence that was presented. So what did they present to me as evidence? These are examples. They would show me a picture, and they're like, all right, see, I got the picture of the cougar. And I'd be looking at it, and they're like, see that there? It ran across the field. I cannot use that as evidence. Another thing, and just so you know, lots of these are real pictures that I received all the time. They'd say, see that thing walking in the background there? That was a cougar that was walking. I say, I cannot call that a cougar, but did you see how big that raccoon is on the tree in front of it? And so these cannot be used as evidence for cougars. Here's another one. Someone said, I finally got the picture for you. This cannot be used as evidence. Actually, when you look at the body shape, I think that's probably more of a fox than anything else. Here's another one. They said, here's the cougar, I got it. Obviously, there's nothing that can distinguish that as a cougar. In fact, I think that's a house cat. This is what I received most of the time. People were simply mistaken as to what they were seeing. This was sent in as a cougar sighting. Obviously, looking at this right away, everyone could look at that and say, that's a bobcat. Yes, it was a bobcat. Here's another one that was sent in as a cougar. That too is a bobcat. Believe it or not, I had one of the commissioners for the state of Tennessee tell me, I finally got a picture of a cougar. I'm going to send it to me. He even told me, he said, whatever you do, don't tell me it's a bobcat, because I know it's not. And this was the picture. You cannot get more bobcat than that. You can see the bobtail. You can see the white and black on its ears. But people sometimes, and I'm not laughing at they're just ignorant, not in a nasty way, but ignorant in not understanding the difference between a cougar and a bobcat. Here is my pet peeve, and believe it or not, on our Facebook page, I've actually addressed this, and I'm still addressing this. The reason the public is so misinformed when it comes to wildlife, and especially these cougar sightings, this is actually a big name newscast in the Nashville area that treats not just Nashville but southern Kentucky. This is their news station. It says mountain lion captured on trail camera. They're telling the public that they caught this. This is a picture of a house cat. There's no reference in size, but you can see the coloration. When you run it through filters, you can almost see a striped tail. But the thing that I love, and it's irritating me because it says this News Channel 5, your news and information leader. Tell me what good public service they are doing when they are misinforming their public about what wildlife is out there. They were actually scaring the patootie off their general public by constantly reporting these mountain lion sightings that were not really mountain lions. And so this is one of my pet peeves. I'm still going to fight this fight as long as I can. But this is why so many people are seeing these cougars out there. Now, the other thing that got on my nerves is when people would intentionally try to deceive, and they would filter, especially on social media, pictures like this. This is one of the pictures that I had to debunk, I bet you at least 24 times, because it'd be sent to me saying, we got it on camera. This is a well-traveled picture. We always do reverse image searches to see where it's been posted on the internet, and this has been floating around all over the place. This is probably the most well-traveled picture. People have claimed this from Tennessee to Alaska to Florida, saying, see, I told you we have black panthers in North America. This is actually a picture, when you do the reverse image search, comes back as a leopard that's on a game reserve in South Africa. But they don't realize how smart we are to kind of do some of this investigative work. And so that's what we do to debunk these myths about what's really out there. Now, I will tell you, every once in a while, we do get a picture that causes us to say, huh, I wonder what we got here. So this was a picture that I received when I was living and working in the east of a mountain lion, or what they believe to be a mountain lion, up on the Cumberland Plateau. And so when you look at it, you're like, wow, that could be our first ever cougar, documented cougar. And so we do investigative work to find out what's going on. So I asked this gentleman if he had any other pictures of animals from that exact same trail camera, and he did. He sent me a picture of a couple of deer from that exact same camera. And so literally what we do is we superimpose the two, so they're literally, you can see the log kind of lines up perfectly and the trees in the background line up perfectly, and that supposed cougar suddenly shrinks drastically in size. And so it only puts that cat in that 20 or 30 pound range. And so whether or not that was just a large feral cat or a bobcat that we can't see the tail, but it's definitely not a cougar. And then one of my favorite ones was this picture that was sent to me. They finally captured a picture of a black panther. And if you can't see where it is, I'll point to it. It is right there. And so when you look closely at it, it has this kind of shape of a cat, and it's kind of large. There's actually, let me go back a little bit. There's actually a cow carcass in the foreground of that picture, and this black panther was coming in and feeding on it. And this trail camera captured this picture. So our director asked me to go visit this woman, and I interviewed her. She showed me these pictures, and I was taking measurements to try to figure out how big this animal was. And she asked me, she goes, do you want to see the pictures of the wolf I got? Now, if you ever took my classes, there are no wolves in Tennessee either. And so I told her I would love to see the picture of the wolf. And so she took me, and she was showing me this. And what this is here, what you're looking at, is not a wolf. It's a melanistic or black version of a coyote. I don't want to say really common, but fairly common, where coyotes are melanistic or black coat. And so I was looking at that, and finally I saw this picture of this melanistic coyote. And if you look at that picture of the quote-unquote Black Panther, you can see a little chest blaze or mark on its chest. And sure enough, on that melanistic coyote had the same one. So all it was just the angle of the animal when the picture took that it made it appear to be cat-like. So obviously, in the end, this was not a Black Panther. So, I'm wrapping up. Does anyone remember this? All right, this is where I'm going to ask you to type into the chat box. What did I tell you to remember? What was that phrase that I said? Okay. You guys are awesome because you're all wrong. I haven't seen anyone post the right response yet. All right. I promise you I did not change it. Here's what it is, folks. We think these classes, did you see this? Are absolutely amazing. Your eyes don't catch that. You're thinking you know what it's saying, but your eyes just kind of blur out some of the finer details. And so it's really simple for your eyes to be deceived. When you have a preconceived notion of what you want to see or what you think you're going to see, your eyes don't see those minor details. And I will tell you, literally your mind tells your eyes what they want to see. And so with that, I hope this gives you an idea. Now, I will tell you, anyone that sees a cougar on the East Coast and they claim they see a cougar, I'm not going to say they didn't see it. Odds are likely they didn't see it, but there's always that rare possibility. But I hope that demonstration really proves of how simple it is for your eyes to be deceived. So that, my friends, now watch this closely, is why there's so many mistaken identities. Now, did you catch, if you were busy reading the words, imagine riding down the road. Now stare at the road. You just see something flash across your headlights. And you saw brown, you saw a tail. Right away, your mind's telling you, hey, I just saw a cougar. Odds are, if you're in an area where those cougars don't live, you probably did not see that, but your mind's telling you you saw that. So that is why there's so many mistaken identities out there. And I know a lot of people will fight me and argue that because they know exactly what they saw. And like I said, I'm not going to spend my time arguing with them, but in most situations, that's probably not what they saw. So with that, I think I'm going to end it here and let you know those are the fantastic felines of North America. And if you have any questions, don't ask them yet. Let me do my last thing. Photo credits, Bob Howdershell. Mark Payton gave me a bunch of cougar pictures. I also got a couple from some other folks today. Got to thank them for all those wonderful photos. Everyone should know Wildlife for You, the website. We're going to be loading up the first half of 2019, all the webinars that we're going to host from January all the way up to June. Hopefully I'll get that up there before Christmas. Easiest thing is follow us on Facebook. If you haven't liked the page, that's where we do a lot of the updates. Just go there. I would love, especially if folks haven't done this before, I would love if you attended tonight's webinar, whether you liked it or didn't like it, if you could provide comments, a rating, just what you think of the course, I think that'd be fantastic. I always ask that of the new classes we teach. But here's one of the things I wanted to show you. A lot of you have participated in these. A lot of you have the recordings. We did this little Black Friday deal not too long ago, but we're going to keep it available because it'd be a great Christmas present. All the recordings we've done. Well, I'm going to add one. We've done 23 different webinars this past year. It was 22, but with this fantastic felines, it's now 23. But of those, say the 22 prior to today, 11 of them focused on bears, and you can see that bear package. Bear encounters, bear tales, bears in your backyard, super sleepers, 3 bears, whole bunch of different bear webinars. You can get all those recordings for $30, or there's another package that has 11 recordings. It's all the wildlife. We do colossal cats, neighborhood critters, rebounding wildlife, the elk one, sly as a fox. There's that package, which is $30. Now, if you order any of these packages, you could give them, you don't have to give them just to one friend. You could give them to 20 different friends. You can give them to everyone you know if you want to. A few people have ordered all 22. Now there's going to be 23 for $50, and it's that gift that keeps on giving. You could package them. You could send all the cat ones to your cat-loving friend. You could send the bear ones to whoever. But anyway, this is a Christmas offer that's available. I think it's up on our Facebook page, but I'll repost it. But this is one of those things where just one gift you could give to a whole bunch of your wildlife-loving friends. So with that, you've seen this before. I'll go to there, and I will leave it up here as I answer all the questions you may have. Now, give me a second to catch up. I'm going to expand this box so I can read everything. I just laughed here because I'm reading the comments and I see all these. We think these classes are absolutely amazing. I forgot that was the question I asked, but I should do a screenshot because there's like 10 different ones saying the same thing. Any questions you have on the class, by all means, ask away. Now remember, you come up with a question later on. Shoot me an email, shoot me a text. I don't care. I'll be happy to answer it. Oh, thank you, Trish. I don't know how many people use Twitter. I didn't use it much, but Trish Stevens has been helping out. She's a godsend. But she developed a Wildlife for You Twitter page to help spread the word even more. So if anyone does use Twitter, as my dogs attack each other in the background, if anyone does use Twitter, we do have a Wildlife for You Twitter page. So visit us there, like us. We're always sending out tweets, usually multiple tweets a day. Okay. Mara says, I live in Durango, Colorado. When out hiking and walking national forest trails, do you recommend carrying some type of protective mechanism for mountain lions? If so, what would I carry, or is it just a preference? I find myself never knowing what to do. Awesome question, Mara, and that's cool you live in Durango. I absolutely love Durango. If you are worried about mountain lions, first off, try not to, because if you haven't taken the either colossal cats or cougar country, cougars are actually, I don't want to say they're easier to deal with than bears. They might not be, but you encounter them less often than bears. Cougars are naturally afraid of people. They run. They have such wonderful sense of smell and eyesight and hearing. They are gone. They don't want anything to do with people, so they are gone before you get there. That's why you rarely ever see cougars. However, they can be a little bit more tricky to deal with because they are true carnivores. They are looking for that meal to eat. Oftentimes, people report being stalked by a cougar. And I will tell you that happens. Generally, just like I was describing the bobcat that was stalking me because it saw movement, that's what cougars do. When they're out and about and they see this slow moving creature, human, walking through the forest, it doesn't click in their mind right away what that is. And so a lot of times when they immediately see an animal, they go into that stalk mode. They're trying to figure out, is this my next meal? And so they may lie in wait for you to get closer. They may follow. They're trying to figure out if you're something worthwhile going after. They will, in almost every single situation, as soon as you yell, as soon as you scream, as soon as you identify yourself as a human, they take off the other way. So dealing with a cougar is usually fairly simple. You identify yourself, you yell, and it scares the cougar away. Sometimes the cougar might not run away right away, and that's where we will always recommend bear spray. Bear spray will work on more than just bears, so it's a good deterrent on cougars as well, and it's been effectively deployed against cougars. And so if you are uncomfortable hiking where you're at, hopefully you won't be uncomfortable, but it's always a good idea if you're hiking in bear and cougar country to have that spray, have it handy, especially if you're going into an area where an encounter is likely. And what I mean by that, like if there's an area with lots of food for bears, just understand you can run into a bear. If you encounter a carcass, whether or not it's a mule deer, an elk, a cow, understand that there could be a bear or a cougar that's been feeding on it. So that's where you need to be prepared. So by all means, bear spray would probably be your most effective tool that you want to carry. Lori asked, do any of the North American cats live in packs? No, usually the cats are solitary animals, that nothing like the African lions. But I will tell you, like the females, they'll give birth to their kittens, and they'll stay with those kittens for up to a year. And those kittens grow fast. And so oftentimes you'll see a picture that may have like what appear to be 4 adult mountain lions. And generally what it is the mom and 3 of her yearlings. And so they get to be fairly large. The female yearlings stay a little bit longer than the male yearlings. So whenever you see a pack of, say, for example, mountain lions, that's generally what it is a mother with her offspring. But they usually disperse before too long. And cats, for the most part, these bobcats, the lynx, the mountain lion, they're all pretty much solitary animals. They'll get together for the mating season, and obviously a mom raising her offspring. But for the most part, they're fairly solitary. Chanda asked a really good question about cougars. How big is the range of cougars? Might they ever be reintroduced to the East Coast or not enough habitat? I have this discussion all the time. I would love to see cougars repopulate the East Coast. Whether or not, I can almost guarantee no state is going to actively reintroduce them. It's too controversial. There's too much sentiment. Many people in the public are fearful of cougars, and they wouldn't, especially on the East Coast where a lot of the population lies, they would not be in favor. It'd be too controversial to release cougars. Having said that, cougars are moving eastward, and they are going to show up. Might not be this year, might not be 10 years, but might be a few decades from now. They're moving eastward, and we've learned as a society that we can live together with these animals. We don't have to exterminate them. And the thing that gives me hope about the East being recolonized by cougars, because people say there's too many people on the East Coast. We can't have cougars here. And all I show them, does anyone know who P22 is? P22 is literally a world famous cougar that is radio collared that lives in the outskirts of Los Angeles. It lives literally where that Hollywood sign is. In fact, there's some really famous pictures of this mountain lion literally with the Hollywood sign right in the background. And so that part of the country is insanely populated with humans, yet there's cougars living there. And so you can live together. It's unfortunately there's a big disparity between the mindset of people in the West versus the mindset of people in the East. The West has always lived with these larger animals, whether or not they're cougars, grizzlies, wolves, black bears. They're just part of the equation. They've always been there. The people on the East, you have to understand, those animals have been extirpated or killed out, other than black bears, have been killed out for sometimes centuries. And so there's generations and generations of people that are afraid that those animals don't belong in their mind. And so it's much more difficult for people to change the way they think about wildlife on the East Coast because they haven't been living with those animals for too long. Those were my dogs wrestling in the background. No mountain lions here. Laura, I did not hear about the Amazon workers. I can tell you without a doubt, bear spray definitely works because I accidentally sprayed myself when I wasn't paying attention to the wind direction. Bet you have an awesome point, but Bet Weston said, "Do killing the cougars across America cause the deer herds to become out of balance? When people here complain about deer eating their gardens, I always advocate having a cougar in the neighborhood. I think that'd be fantastic." Yeah, and that's the crazy thing because people nowadays, especially in the East, they're used to seeing deer everywhere, and that's not what it used to be. In fact, because of the lack of apex predators, because we got on the East Coast, because we got rid of cougars, we got rid of wolves, black bear populations were seriously diminished because those predator populations were literally wiped out. It caused these herbivores, the deer, to populate far beyond anything that they've ever known. And the problem with that is the public there thinks that's normal. That's the way it should be. You should have deer coming out your ears. That's not how it should be. That's a system out of balance. And believe it or not, it is more detrimental in many cases to have too many animals than not enough. Because when you have too many animals, especially a large animal like an herbivore, like a deer, what they do is they eat and eat and eat, and they end up destroying habitat. And so, for example, the state of Pennsylvania, they're having problems with their forests not regenerating, because as soon as a small tree would start to grow, a deer would eat it. And so having too many of those herbivores on the landscape is absolutely, if not worse, than having not enough. Very good point there, though, Bet. Oh, Mara, that's a. I wish I had the graphic. A couple of my classes, I go over that. I didn't include it in this one. It's really simple. And now I won't tell you how to differentiate between a cougar and a bobcat because they're going to be fairly similar. Obviously, size would be a difference, but it's really easy to differentiate between a cat print and a dog print based on two distinguishing factors. And I wish I had the video to show you. But whenever you see claw marks, that is almost in all situations that's going to be from a canine. Now the track itself, it's 4 toes and a main pad, and so they're similar in that regard. But as soon as you see toenails or claw marks, you know that's going to be from a canid, because in almost every situation the cat retracts its claws when it's walking or running, and so you usually never see claw marks in a cat track. So that's the first thing to look for. The second thing is that the main pad is shaped a little bit differently. On a dog or a canine, that main pad comes and it forms, how can I do this? It's a single hump right at the very top. A cat, on the other hand, it's got 2 humps at the top. It literally forms the letter M. And I always think whenever I see the M at the top of that main pad, I think M for meow, so it's a cat. And so if you remind me or you shoot me an email, I could send you that graphic to make it real easy for you. Okay, Bob Cowden asked, what's the average size litter for bobcats? And I was just reading that. Typically, it ranges, if I'm remembering correctly, usually like 4 to 6 is average. Obviously, they could go a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less, but a really healthy female bobcat is going to give birth to that many kittens. Now, understand, the young animals have it hard. And so not all those kittens make it to adulthood. And so if she makes it through and they have 3 or 4 that make it or survive to adulthood, she's a really, really good mom. But they can typically give birth to up to 6 in their litter. But understand not all of those will survive. Mara asked if I saw the video of the 4 or 5 cougars on the porch in Colorado. I think I'm thinking of the same one. What to do in that situation? Most people, understandably, would take pictures, and obviously that's what this person did. By all means, do that. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You'll probably never, ever have that situation again. But if it was me personally, after I took a couple of pictures and thought it was really cool, I would scare the daylights out of those cats. Because if they are starting to become comfortable coming around my house, my porch, drinking off my porch, they're going to be really comfortable going up to any house. And it's not a good thing for the cougars. We talk about this in the bear world all the time. And we're actually having a discussion yesterday about a different term for what do we call these bears that come up to that are habituated in food condition. And they're trying to come up with a different name because they don't like nuisance bear or problem bear, because it gives a negative impression of the bear, and the bear's not at fault. And the one that I threw out that I liked, in fact, I'm going to see if I can start using it. I want to call it, you're not going to like this, but we should start calling them death row bears. Because if you mention it, oh, that's a death row bear, the general public who doesn't know anything about bears is going to say, what do you mean death row? They're going to be concerned. Why is that bear going to die? And that's when you can educate them. You can explain, oh, because someone's leaving food out or water or whatever. That that animal, whether it's a bear or a cougar, is going to not live as long because of the human that's screwing it up for them. And so, yeah, like I said, if I was that person that had those cougars on my porch, I think it'd be pretty awesome to see. But I would definitely try to do the best for those cougars and scare the crap out of them by banging pots and pans and just doing whatever I can to make sure they had a negative impression when they were leaving. Lori asks if cougars become trash cougars like bears do. No, not really. It's not that much of a common occurrence. You have to understand they're a true carnivore. They're eating meat. Bears are eating garbage. They're opportunistic, so they're going to eat whatever they find. Cats prefer that fresh kill, and so you don't typically have a cat that's getting into garbage. Um, Obviously, what they could do if there's like a dumpster situation and there's lots of raccoons and rats and other critters that are getting into the trash, those live animals could attract a cougar to that area. But for the most part, the cougar's not going to be scavenging in a dumpster or trash can. Any other questions? You guys were fantastic. I'm so thankful. I'm glad my little word game thing worked out. I thought of that last night. Just how do I teach them that their eyes can fool you? And I will tell you, I've talked to countless people that have seen cougars. People I work with who are very well trusted, and they swear up and down that's exactly what they saw. And I try telling them, this is kind of the analogy I use. Have you ever gone to a magic show where you know a magician is doing a card trick, whatever kind of trick he's wanting to do, you know he's trying to fool you, and you watch as closely as you can to try to catch him making a mistake. And usually the magicians are so good, they still fool your eyes. You still cannot pick that up. Now, this is how simple it is. Imagine like with a cougar, you're wanting, your mind is wanting to see that because it's in the mind that that's what you saw, and so it's convincing your brain that, and so your eyes are the easiest thing to fool. Imagine what it's like when your brain is even working to fool you, and so it's super easy to catch something out of the corner of your eye and just create that image and like that's what I saw. Shirley asks, will cougars kill house cats? Cougars house cats can be hors d'oeuvres for cougars. They will absolutely take a house cat, no problem whatsoever. Whenever a cougar is kind of seen lingering in a subdivision or moving through a subdivision, that's what it's doing. It's making its rounds. People will put their small pets in the backyard, and you can't do that, especially if there's been a cougar in an area. Now they don't stick around that area long, but they would have no problem taking a house cat or a small dog or anything like that. Bet that is kind of funny you mentioned that. I was I was telling my wife well, no, it wasn't my wife. I forget who I was telling, but so, someone who I respect as like an amazing outdoors person and just extremely intelligent. He said for a long time he always wanted. He goes, you know what? When I go, I always thought it'd be great if they would just dump me so I could be eaten by a grizzly bear or something. I thought, man, that'd be pretty cool. But then he's like, that probably wouldn't be too easy for my family to accept. And I also saw that, so I'm probably rethinking my way of disposal, I guess. Yes, surely. I always advise people keeping their cats inside. They was a 4 billion migratory birds, or no, it's not birds. It's just 4 billion animals are killed by domestic cats every year. That's obviously it's calculated, but it's a guess. But that's the best guess that they could come up with. So cats, if you have indoor cats, keep them indoors. All right, guys, I think that's probably most of the questions. Well, thank you, Mara. I enjoyed giving it. So hopefully you could join us for all the future ones. But with that, I'm going to thank everyone for being such an awesome group, asking wonderful questions and providing excellent comments. And with that, I'm going to stop the recording and bid everyone a wonderful, wonderful evening. Merry Christmas if I don't see you or speak to you before then. Hopefully before Christmas, I'll have the next lineup of webinars for the early 2019 season. But don't forget, if you want to order the webinar recordings as a Christmas gift, it should already be up on the Facebook page. You might have to scroll for it. If it's down low, I'll try to bump it to the top. So it's a wonderful gift. You can give it to as many people as you want. Anyone that loves wildlife, just pick and choose and share the education with them. So thanks, guys. I appreciate everything.